check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Right on, writers, and welcome first-time viewers to the Books by Adrian author platform, and welcome back to Livestream Sunday. I am your host, Adrian Santiago. Welcome. I am an author and content creator on here on YouTube. If you are a first-timer with us here today, I'm writing a murder mystery set in a sci-fi fantasy world called Mythic Shadow of the Spark, which should be out early next year. Shooting for January, February. I'll let you guys know when I know. If you want to know before anybody else and you are not already signed up, please sign up for my newsletter where I am going to be letting everybody know about the cover reveal, the release date, and all that kind of good stuff before I announce it again on my channel for everyone else. So first through the door is the newsletter. We have an excellent show for you today. Our guest today is Jack Adkins. I have such a hard time saying his name. I don't know why. Jack Adkins. For some reason, I keep clashing against it. Hopefully, it doesn't happen too much during the show. If you guys have questions for Mr. Adkins, please label them with a Q, a capital Q and a colon, and that's going to help me to find them for the live chat Q&A at the end of the episode. Be sure to stick around for the full hour for that. And on that topic, welcome to everyone in the chat. I saw some faces in here early. I'm very, very happy to see you guys here on time, let alone early. So thank you so very much. For everybody else coming in, welcome. Like the video, and if you're not subscribed, please do so ASAP. Now, I'd like to not waste any time, dive right into the AuthorTube news for this week. It's like the most dramatic music for the most undramatic segment. All right, this week in AuthorTube, we've got first through the door here. Writing Done Right is the name of the channel. This gentleman is sharing a video this week about why he publishes to KDP first. But the video is more than that because he goes into all the different avenues through which he publishes, including Ingram Spark, Lulu, Amazon, etc. So if you would like a nice broad look at the publishing options before you as an independent publisher, as a self-published author, this is a very good video for you guys to check out. Next up, we have Magdalene Lane, who is doing the AuthorTube newbie tag because she's back after like a year of not making a video. But in that year, she wrote a whole novel, and it's coming out next month. 30 days from the date of this video, which was a couple days ago. So if you want to check out her book, which I believe is Spicy Romance, go check out her channel, go check out the video. Both of these videos so far are linked down below, as is the third, which is the channel by Ashley Howard, who shared a video on prepping up for NaNoWriMo, Preptober as they love to call it. So definitely check that out if you are joining her for NaNoWriMo this year. And if you are currently in the throes of Preptober, we are getting to the end of October here. So if you are not ready yet, you better get ready because NaNoWriMo is bananas. All right, y'all. That takes care of the business for this week. I am making my list of videos smaller here so I don't goof it up later. All right, guys. Coming up after this animation is the one, the only, Mr. Jack Adkins. Jack, welcome to Livestream Sunday. How are you today?
Excellent, thank you. That's a pretty great intro. Thank you.
Oh, hey, I try to make everybody feel welcome and special. The applause is very, very loud for everyone. Mr. Adkins, for those in my audience who may not know of you yet, who are you, where are you from, and what are you currently working on right now?
I'm Jack Adkins. I'm an IT professional. I've done that for 25 years. I live in northern Kentucky, and you'll probably be able to determine that by my accent as we go. And I'm currently working on the third book in my first series called The Dragons of Dorwine, and it's set in a world where dragons rule everything. Dragons are worshipped as gods, and their blood is used as currency. All magic that's in this land is derived from their blood. So I'm working on the third book in that series, and it should be out September next year. I've just started, so...
That sounds awesome, and we are going to get into your series and the individual books within it in a little bit. But just right off the bat, that sounds awesome. I'm really into that. Now, we have some people in the chat who are eager to say hi to you, so I just wanted to take a moment to say hi to them. We had RC Scott in here before the show even began. Thank you so very much, Mr. Scott, for being early. We have Nova Carmen, who... it rings a bell, but I don't know if you're one of my regulars around here. I don't believe I've seen you. So, hi, how are you? Hello. Yeah, there's a bunch of nano stuff going on lately. We have a Dega Outlaw here as well. Thank you guys very much for being here so early. I'm going to see or at least I want to see the chat continue to grow throughout the rest of the show here. And please do not forget to start filling in the chat with your questions for Mr. Adkins, because we're going to get to them in a little bit. All right, let's dive into the interview proper. Mr. Adkins, let's get a little background on you. Where you said you were from Kentucky. Have you always been from Kentucky? Did you move there at some point in life? What's the family history with Kentucky?
I was born in eastern Kentucky. So if you know anything about eastern Kentucky, it's kind of an organism unto itself. It's it's very Appalachian.
Okay.
And I lived there until 2004. My wife and I moved to Alaska for 3.5 years.
Nice.
Yeah. And then we went to South Dakota for 5.5 years. And then now, 2013, we moved back to Kentucky. So as far as I know, we're here to stay. So
let's take a brief minute to talk about Alaska. Did you guys like it up there? I know you moved back, so you didn't stick around, but what was that experience like? How was that different from the rest of the continental U.S.?
Totally different. Yeah, we loved Alaska. People there were fantastic, and we didn't live in the beautiful part of Alaska. We lived in what's known as the bush. Yeah, okay. It's ugly. It's not like trees everywhere. There aren't any trees. It's all tundra. So
that's too bad.
Yeah, I know. But I got to see some of the pretty stuff. We went there for my wife's job. My wife's a dentist, straight out of dental school. We went there kind of for her to get some great on-job training. And the gentleman who was in charge of the clinic she worked at had been a dentist in the bush for 35 years. So she got fantastic training. It was great, and everything is different. Everything there is I won't say everything's backwards, but it's very different from what we experienced in the lower 48, which is what they call it. But everybody has a snow machine, it's just a snowmobile. Everybody has an ATV or a boat, and everybody has a satellite dish.
And you have to have those things. There's no choice.
Well, that's the survival. So, but it was a lot of fun. Very extreme. They don't have spring and fall. It's mud and snow.
Yeah.
It's only so.
Two seasons, mud and snow.
Yeah. Very cold. Like the coldest I experienced was 77 below. Yeah. The power steering fluid in my truck froze. So I got in and started it, turned the wheel, and it just broke. And I just went back in the house.
Whoa.
So, yeah, extreme cold.
I mean, I had my childhood in Buffalo, New York, so I've known some pretty harsh winters, some blizzards, all that stuff. But
Yeah,
that's another level, man. Alaska, that's another level for
yeah.
sure. Okay, well, I wanted to ask about on your Amazon bio. It mentions 30 years of writing. Tell us a little bit about that. When did you start writing, and what have you done with all of your writing? Because I know that the books came a little later. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started writing really early in elementary school, and it was a good expression. I had situations. I lost my dad when I was about 9 years old, and I had a really
My
difficult
condolences.
time. Yeah, it was tough. And a lot of times, what do you say to a 9-year-old kid who's lost his dad? So mm, I didn't have a lot of people really say, they didn't know how to encourage me or how to interact with me. So I wrote everything down, and I wrote silly stories and things. In middle school, I discovered Dungeons and Dragons, so it opened this whole new level of fantasy novels. And R.A. Salvatore, that was my jam. I read The Crystal Shard in like 7 hours on the couch. I read it until like 3 o'clock in the morning, and all the Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss, all their stuff. So, but I kept writing. We had to do portfolios, and I would always write these like ridiculous 50-page stories that everybody would hate to grade. But I was trying to find my voice and trying to figure out what I wanted to write. Uh, and then one of my first IT jobs, I was at a college, so I got to take some courses for free, and I took creative writing fiction by Dr. Marcia Harlow, and she's fantastic. She touched a lot of my excuses. She took those and kind of turned them around and said, this thing you use as a crutch, this is actually a good thing. So that was extremely helpful. So I kept writing. Wrote some urban fantasy and really enjoyed that. Some spy kind of stuff. I like that. We moved. I kept writing, but I never dreamed that I would publish because it was also personal. And it really wasn't until probably 2018, 2019 when I started to be aware of self-publishing and started to meet some people, and I thought maybe I would do self-publishing as kind of a gateway, figure out what I was doing, and then get into traditional publishing. But the more that I understood that business, the more I decided, no, that's not the way. I think self-publishing may be the way I want to go, period. But so I'm starting to resurrect some of those old stories and kind of rewrite them and fix some of the problems, and that's kind of the path that I'm on now. So, but there's so many new ideas too. So it's trying to decide what to write is hard. I can't hear you.
I mute myself so as not to interrupt you while you're speaking. And then I forget to unmute myself when I start speaking. The you mentioned that you were an IT guy. You have been for what, 20 years now, you said?
25 years.
Good grief. And you're still doing it today. So you're not a
Yeah.
full-time author. Author is your side hustle, so to speak,
Yeah.
these days. Yeah. So how did the entire thing kind of shake out for you when you were first getting started to actually publish your books, deciding whether to go to self-publishing, traditional publishing? Where did your thought process, how did you get to self-publishing and get started in that?
I had some time, so I had about a 2-year period, and now I'm a NaNoWriMo guy. I've been doing that for 10, 12 years. I've been doing it for a very long time.
How many times have you won?
4.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Good numbers.
yeah, it's hard. It's hard,
Yeah.
but it's Brandon Sanderson the other day said, "I'm going to try to do NaNoWriMo." I'm like, bro, if you can't do it, what chance do any of us have? But
I mean, it's
yeah,
basically the Stephen King model, right? Like
yeah,
he basically does it every he does it like
yeah,
over 3 months instead of one, but it's the same thing.
yeah. So I started writing a story that didn't get that I haven't published because it's got a lot of problems. So I started just investigating. What am I going to need to do to get published? Well, you need to find an agent, and you need to get your story finished, and you need to do these certain things. So I started looking into self-publishing because I've always had a kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, and that appeals to me a lot.
Absolutely.
And in the different IT jobs that I've worked, I've had a lot of skills that translate really well to being a self-published author. Really familiar with Facebook ads because I worked for a company where I built their e-commerce store from nothing to like $1 million business. And I learned how all those things, the Shopify and the WooCommerce and all those things. I learned that. I learned ads. So some of those things were not a big deal. And then obviously using the writing software and all that. So it kind of made sense for me to step into self-publishing. But the thing that was the real catalyst is I met some great people. There were some really great authors. J.T. Williams is a guy that I just messaged him on Facebook out of the blue, and it's like, hey, I got your book for free on a thing that I saw. How does all this work? And he was super cool, super
Nice.
patient. Yeah, great guy. He helped. T.L. Branson's another guy that he would answer dumb questions, and kind of got me to a point where I started to feel comfortable with like, say, yeah, I think self-publish is the way to go because I really want the control.
It's the same reason I came to it as well, is having as much, in this case, full control of the creative process, not having anybody tell you what you can and cannot put inside your book. That was paramount for me. But it does come with this kind of like harsh reality of like you're not just working one job, you're working like 19 jobs now.
Yeah.
Like you got to
Yes.
you got to become a specialist in areas that you've never had anything to do with before, and you have to be good at it because you're not going to make any money if you don't. You're not going to sell any books. So, in the spirit of selling our self-published books, go ahead and pitch to the audience. The Dragons of Dorwine. You already touched on it a little bit. Sounds like a very cool fantasy world with magic derived from dragon blood. What can you tell us about the series as a whole?
So the series as a whole is set in a place called Dorwine, which is one continent on a world that has 3 major continents. They're very separated. They don't have intercontinental trade, or for the most part, the average person doesn't know that any of these other places exist, and it's for very specific reasons. In Dorwine, the god that set these dragons forth, he established them as protectors for the people. He said, your job is to care for them, provide for them, teach them these things that I have set forth. And immediately they just became tyrants. And they took over, they built the cities. People began to worship them. They didn't really stop them. They kind of encouraged it. And each of the different dragons, and they're divided up into different color dragons. Each of their kingdoms kind of has its own flavor. For example, in the first book, the dragon that is kind of front and center, he's called Bog, is what people call him. He's a black dragon lord, and he's the lord over all black dragons in the continent where they live. He's kind of a slimy guy. He's kind of a guy that puts money first, greedy, very greedy. So you would expect to see those kind of characters.
He's one of those dragons, huh?
Yeah, he is. So the first tale is kind of a swashbuckling tale. Our main character is he's a pirate, wannabe pirate, and so it starts off kind of in that realm, and so pull a lot of those elements in. And it's a creature feature. There are no humans really in my first book. None of the main characters.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I introduced some of the different races because it's a big part of the world is how different people came about, and the fact that they're different. What does that mean? Because I think we deal with that a lot in our own context. I know people, I have really good friends who look different than me. They speak different than me. They had different upbringings than me. What's that mean? How do we coexist and get along? And I think it's a beautiful thing. Some of my best friends are people that like, wow, teach me the things that you know. And living in Alaska was great because I was a white guy living in a not white place. That was fantastic. I get to see and understand that, like, this isn't my world. This
Yeah.
idea that I have, no, that's not the reality. So very beneficial. But so I kind of want to deal with those issues, and it's overall it's a humorous. There's a humorous tone to it. You know, you deal with some serious issues, but the main character is hard to take serious. So
a nice goofball.
yeah,
Nice.
he is. He's very self-important. He's extremely talented, but he doesn't really care. He just
How many books are in the series, and how often do they release?
It is a 6-book series with a time gap in between the 2 trilogies, and I'm aiming for 1 per year, which is a little bit of a stretch working full time.
You've done 3 so far, yeah?
Yeah. Well, I'm working on the 3rd one. The 3rd one is yeah. And it's kicking my butt right now, but it'll come together. It always does.
Yeah, I'm in the editing phase of my first novel, and it's kicking my butt. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh man.
All right. Well, then, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about I'm going to try this Vustaan Incident.
Yeah. The Vustaan Incident. Early on, a lot of my author buddies are like, "Hey, you need a reader magnet," and I was like, "Oh, what is that?" Well, you need to give a book away. I'm like, "Ha! Give a book away? Do you know how much this costs? How much the editing and all these things cost?" They're like, "No, it can be a short story." So I didn't really know what to write, except I knew that my main character, he's half goblin, half genie, which he doesn't really know that, or he doesn't accept that. As a kid, he had a pet honey badger named Slobbers. That was the most aggressive creature on the planet. It was as likely to attack him as it was anybody else. So the story, the Vustaan Incident, is kind of a slice of his teenhood, where his father, who's this famous admiral and engineer and all these cool things, he takes him to this island, this orc island, where there's this famous brothel, and they're trying to recover something that was stolen. So it's all hijinks and hilarity as this basically 12, 13-year-old kid. Goblins age differently because they really only live to be about 40. So he would be the equivalent of a human 16, 17 years old.
Interesting.
So they go, and everything that could go wrong does, So it's a short story. It's probably 8,000 words, but it gives readers a glimpse into the mindset of my main character for the first 3 books. If you read that story and you really don't like that character, you probably won't enjoy the books as much. So,
gotcha. All right. And then along those same lines, we also have The Dead of Winter, another short story, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. And it's totally apart. It's kind of like I've taken bookends because there's a lot of history in my world, and some things that take place in the 3rd book need a little bit of context. So this is hundreds of years in the past. This iconic figure comes forth, and this story is about a guy who is just kind of a slime ball. He's a guy who is a womanizer. He's a drunk. He's in the army. Instead of doing the 1 term that was required for people that live in this vale, he keeps re-enlisting because he likes the notoriety. He's a good swordsman. He has a lot of people look up to him, and he craves those things. Because of his choices, he's not home when an invading army of orcs come and they wipe out his entire town. And so he's dealing with all this guilt. So he decides he's going to basically take his own life by marching up the mountain into the hive of orcs that attacked his village, and he's going to kill the leader, even if it means his own life. So
it's a big sacrifice.
Yeah. And he feels like doing that will offset all these things that he did in his life, all this bad stuff. And so that's kind of his premise as he goes to march up the mountain.
Awesome. That sounds like a good one. And then the one I was very curious about, there is a TikTok short story. Now, I found you through TikTok, like many of the guests this season here on Livestream Sunday. What's up with the TikTok short story?
So I put out some stuff on TikTok. What kind of character would you like? What kind of setting and those things? And I put those things together, and I wrote a short story that I haven't gotten edited yet. I need to get that done. But it's going to be about an orc female who is kind of torn between this latent magic that's inside of her, which is just having that power is enough to get her killed, and the desire of her father, what he wants her to do and how he wants her to behave. And there's a square hole that she's supposed to fit in, but she's definitely a round peg. So it's centers around a fight scene that has flashbacks back and forth. So it's a story it's going to tell why she is where she is, because at the very beginning you're like, why is she fighting? Why is she in the ring fighting? Why does she do this? This is kind of a stupid thing she does. But the flashbacks kind of give context to what's going on. And that's what that story is for.
And so it's kind of a crowdsourced story then from
Yes.
the feedback on TikTok.
Yeah, like what do you want to have? You want to fight against a monster, or you want to fight against another humanoid type creature? Well, everybody wanted a monster. So we picked a monster, and they picked the class and all those things, and that was fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, on your website, you have a thing called a bad book review, but
Yes.
it's bad like as in good, when you say that, oh man, it's so bad. Like,
So yeah, it started as a joke, because when I first would blog, my friends would say, man, all your reviews, you're just fanboying everything. These are not helpful reviews. And so I changed it to, so the kind of the tag is not bad books, just bad reviews. And basically I tell the things that I like about a book.
a bad book. So it's a bad book review. It's a badly written review about a good book.
Yes. Somebody actually told me, like, you're a horrible book reviewer. You could never make it as a book reviewer. I'm like, yeah, that's probably true.
Lean into the skid. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I kind of toyed with taking that down because it's a little confusing. And
No, I like it.
it was a joke that I was like, so I did too. I like that too. I was like, okay, I'll keep with this. So
Now, of the, I think I saw at least 3 books reviewed on there. Which of the 3 did you find to be your most enjoyable read from those 3 bad book reviews?
well, my all-time favorite book is Homeland, and I love Homeland by R.A. Salvatore, and that's probably my favorite because for a long time I read that book every year. I've got the original copy that I bought in like 1991 on the shelf behind me, and it looks rough. But that's probably was my favorite one. Close to that is a nonfiction book about the greatest knight, and it's about this guy who was a knight to 5 different English kings, and it's really cool because you get to see how knighthood worked in those medieval periods, and it's leading up to the Crusades. So you get to see how all that worked, and then you get to see kind of inside information about these different kings that everybody knows who King Richard the Lionheart was if you watch Robin Hood. But you get to see some things, you learn some stuff. He was killed by a pot shot from an accidental crossbow fire of a tower. I didn't know that. So just little
I
stuff.
didn't know that either. That's actually kind of sweet.
Book. Yeah, it is sweet. So people like, and the king's dead. So.
Wow, to be like the guy that accidentally fired that bolt.
Yep. Yeah, that would be bad.
It was an accident, guys. I didn't mean to do it, I swear.
Yeah. I've never hit anything. Who knew that I'd roll a 20 today? Yeah.
All right. Now, I have something that I need to ask you about because it quite frankly, it shocked me. I've never seen this before. Your book progress meters on your website. Yeah. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Explain yourself. The book progress meters.
So I have a couple good friends that we read books together. One in particular, we'll pick a book and we'll read it together, and then we'll discuss it as we go along. And kind of in that process, we found Jim Butcher, and man, we love Jim Butcher. And he kind of did this, but he stopped writing, and then everything was a cloud, and he kind of disappeared. So my good friend said, "Look, never do that to me. For your books, why don't you keep tabs somehow? I don't care if you just make a blog post and let it know." Well, then in the course of 3 or 4 years ago, we discovered Brandon Sanderson, who, I mean, like every time he writes a word, somebody goes and updates his website. So I was like, that's what I want to try and do. I want to try and keep it up. And then it's kind of handy because my newsletter, people would email me and say, "Hey, where are you at in the story?" I could just always say, go check the meter out, and keep it updated. So, but it's very bad when I get behind, like I am right now. People are like, "Man, that meter hasn't moved." I'm like, "Yeah, I keep rewriting stuff." I can't hear you.
Thanks. As soon as I saw it, that was my first thought was oh my God, like when you hit those slumps where you're just not really getting much done, or like you said, where you go back and you have to rewrite a chapter or something, that meter's not going to move for a while. Like that would
Yeah.
just be anxiety for me, man.
It is, and it's nice that I can get on my newsletter and say, "Hey guys, yeah, it's not really happening. I've got problems." So I can be honest, and that's kind of nice. People are pretty forgiving as long as I've never missed a deadline. I say, well, we're going to be September. I've never missed that. So as long as things, I'm really praying that NaNoWriMo is where everything comes together.
Nice.
So,
all right. Now, you mentioned this before. I wanted to get back to it. Dungeons and Dragons. And how does your vast history with it influence the writing of your novels?
well, the first thing I had to do when I started writing novels is acknowledge that there are two completely different things. Because in Dungeons and Dragons, the main character is the party, and they have their growth, and they go together and do all these things
As a group.
As a group, yeah, they grow together and they accomplish things together. That's when you're most successful. And the things that you enjoy hearing about, when somebody's talking about their Dungeons and Dragons game, is different than when you read a novel. So I had to pick a main character, and every other character's job then became supporting that arc. Their whole reason they existed was to make that character's arc work, and if it didn't do that, they are cut out. So the real benefit is constantly storytelling, having a weekly game where I have to have different material. It really has developed that muscle where when I'm in a situation writing and I've written myself into a hole, I can go back to my outline, which I'm an outline guy. I can look at it and I can say, okay, I see where I was intending to go, and I can come up with stuff. And I've always been able to come up with stuff. And I think a big part of that is, Dungeons and Dragons is fabulous. As soon as my kids could read and sit still for an hour, they had paper and dice, and they learned how to work together. They learned how to read better because, I would say, well, here's the player's handbook. You need to read what a paladin is if you want to play a paladin, that kind of stuff. So, because that was a benefit for me. I became a voracious reader. I didn't really read much. I would read enough to win a pizza. They had the Pizza Hut had those.
I remember those. Yeah, those personal pans.
Oh man, that was
the best. I remember doing those. Now, I've never played D&D myself, but I have a buddy at work who's been a dungeon master for years, and he has said to me that one of the greatest rushes for him happens when he's laid out the scenario for his players, and somebody will do something that he did not expect. It was not in his plans. It changes everything, and he literally has to tell them, all right, wait a second, and like put up like a curtain and like roll dice on by himself and like figure some stuff out and change the whole plan. I can't imagine, like having to do that on the fly. It's like improv comedy or something. You know what I mean? Like this like flow of idea that has to like be there ready. Like, what's that like? Do you run into that a lot? Like, what's that like in your games?
Yeah, you have to learn how to. Here's where I want things to go. Here's some other avenues. So, I want them to go into the mountain where this ogre lives, and I want them to go and get this item back. But, I need to know what's in this other town, and I need to know this field over here that I mentioned in passing. I need to know what's there. What's the ecology like? Could there be a green dragon in the forest somewhere? That kind of stuff. So you have to have those things sort of prepped. So when they trigger something, then you've got some direction to go. But that's tough, but that is exciting.
I'll bet it's a real good like muscle flex as a writer for when you get stuck in your own stories. Like
Yeah.
kind of figuring it out and coming up with whatever the next thing is. Now, you mentioned a couple of other RPGs in your Amazon bio. What's your latest RPG obsession? Where are you at these days?
Still play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, but I've gone back with my current group to play Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, which probably a lot of your listeners are going to go, oh man, because that's kind of the cringe-worthy. Everybody hated that.
That's the bad one.
Yeah. But I've kind of figured out that a lot of that reason, there were just a lot of reasons. There was a lot of reasons that it failed. At its core, it's actually pretty fun. So we've kind of gone down that, and I just finished playing right before I came in here. It was kind of like, oh guys, sorry, gotta go. So then I came in and got set up for this. But that's been the latest. Before that, I got really excited because one of the original guys who wrote Top Secret, which is a spy RPG for TSR, which D&D was written under TSR. They bought TSR. He came out and they redid the system and they put out some new stuff. It wasn't as great as I hoped it would be. It's cool, has some neat things, but I can't get anybody to play it. So that's the latest obsession that died.
That's something that my buddy at work always talks about, is all the different additions to D&D and the ones that worked, the ones that didn't, the things that carried over into the newer versions, the things that died off. It's kind of fascinating how long that game has existed and evolved and changed. I before meeting him and speaking to you, like, I had no idea that it had been such a constantly evolving thing. You figure, a game comes out, that's what it is forever,
Yeah. And it's kind of going to that. The new thing that they're trying to do is like a D&D Live or D&D 1, where, okay, the system doesn't change, but it's constantly evolving. Here's D&D, and instead of new additions and all that, we make little micro changes based on feedback we get. So we'll see how that goes.
Right on. Yeah. Sounds interesting. Now, I'd like to ask... excuse me, I can't talk today. I'd like to ask you about writing routines that you make a habit of, or that you swear by, things that you incorporate into your own writing techniques. What do you got?
Routines, it's very hard because I have 4 boys between the ages of 13 and 21. Oh yeah, it's a blast, but man, it's a lot of work. Yeah. So we've got a lot of stuff going on all the time. We work full time. I drive about an hour each way to work. My wife and I can drive together, so that's awesome. So I've had to go from a really rigid schedule where I have to get in this room, put on headphones, and block everything else out. And I read through my outline, read through the last thing that I wrote, and then I sit up and do some sprints, and I try and do 15, 20-minute sprints, or I aim for an hour and just break it into 3 pieces, something like that. With all that's going on, I've had to get creative to the point now where I got a clip-on mic and I'm recording myself dictating on my iPhone and bring it back into Dragon and it spits it out. Or I'm on my lunch break on Google Docs changing things in chapters that making some adjustments to the outline and all that. And what I've been pushing to is kind of the Chris Fox 5,000 words an hour, where I can do a 5-minute sprint and be productive. So that's the routine I'm trying to develop, and that might be some of the reason that I'm having trouble with my current whip. But this is still my sanctuary. This is my cave. This room, I'm surrounded by Robert Jordan and Ari Salvatore and Brandon Sanderson. I've got some cool artwork on the wall.
Nice.
Some kind of inspiring things.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So if I can get an hour, I can do about 3,500 words in this room in an hour. So it's just finding that time.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
finding the time, man. That's the hard. And I wonder how authors did it before all this new technology made it so easy to work on it at all times of the day. Like you said, like you can be on your commute to work and do a little Google Docs work. You do a little dictation while you're driving.
yeah,
You can edit yesterday's work, have it read to you by like an app that reads stuff to you. Like,
exactly.
absolutely.
It's amazing.
Fitting it in wherever you can.
Yeah. There's an author friend of mine, T.L. Thorne. She has written all of her books on her phone. All of it. She's got like 6 books. And I'm just like, wow.
Yikes.
Wow.
See, I can't write on my phone. I can
No.
I can read, I can edit maybe a little bit, but to have a full writing session on my phone, I can't do it.
I even got a Bluetooth fold-out keyboard. It's still not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same. An iPad I can get by. I have one
Yeah.
of those little keyboards. I can get by on a nice big iPad. But yeah,
Yeah.
my phone, yeah. And then there's so many distractions like right there when you're on your phone. Even if you have the foresight to put it on airplane mode, then you can't use your Google Docs. Like
Yep.
you got to take it off.
Discord will chime or something.
Yeah, something's going to ping you. Something's going to draw your attention.
Yeah.
Now, you've published a couple of books. You've got a third one on the way. Marketing lessons that you have learned so far, especially ones that you are going to put forth in your newest release.
Well, things that I've learned along the way that I wish I had done. I'll kind of start there. I found the 6-Figure Author podcast with Lindsay Baroker and Andrew Pearson and Joel Lallel. Fantastic. So what they recommend, and these are by the title 6-Figure authors, they're all 6 or 7-figure authors. What I wish I would have done was written the first trilogy first before I published anything. And then I could have set up a release schedule that would have allowed me to gain and continue to build some momentum. So
you could have been writing your second trilogy while the first one is still being doled out.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a benefit you really only have when you start out. So I didn't do that. Okay, that's fine. But some of the marketing things that I've done, the organic stuff is the best. I've done a lot of ads, haven't gotten a lot of traction. I haven't put a ton of money into them, but I've seen Facebook ads are really squirrely right now. I mean, they're something's up there. I haven't delved a lot into Amazon, but really the organic stuff has been fantastic. Through Book Funnel and Story Origin, I have both. So I do a lot of promos and newsletter swaps. That helps. The Reader Magnet has been great. An unexpected thing was this year, you mentioned TikTok. That wasn't really something like, oh, I want to join this platform, but it's been really cool because it's had a great marketing impact. I can tell if I consistently post videos, kind of the meter ticks up a little bit. But I've met some fantastic people. There's some really great human beings out there that I never would have met had it not been for trying to sell books on TikTok.
I've been hearing that from most of my my TikTok guests this season, is that marketing wise, it's changed the game for them.
Yeah.
And I wholeheartedly believe them, because even though I'm not selling a book yet on there, I got to 600 followers on there within a couple of weeks of being on, versus years of being on Instagram and just barely cracking 500 recently.
Yeah.
So, and it's not just the number of followers, like the interaction. They're actually like engaging on TikTok. They actually comment. There's a lot of action on there. You know, a lot to mill from when you're marketing for sure.
And another benefit that I didn't foresee was I've met some narrators who are fairly new, and they'll do lives. So they'll get on and they'll broadcast while they're narrating. And for an author, that's great. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
builds buzz. Yeah, for sure.
this person is good. I like the way they present the material. They're obviously skilled. And there's some people who are very, very good audio narrators that it's just something about their voice that I'm just like,
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know.
no, they have to be right for your project for sure.
Right. So that's been a benefit. And so that's kind of the main marketing thrust that I'm doing. And book 2 sells book 1. That's absolutely true. That's one of the maxims that I've heard. So just continuing to promote book 1 because that's what sells the whole series.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that it took me that I spent a lot of effort in book 1 to make it as good as possible, because that's the root of your series. That's what people are going to go back to. So,
The foundation on which it stands on. Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. All right, now that covers kind of the marketing lessons that you've learned in this whole endeavor. What about on the publishing side itself, the actual like process of getting your book out there? What were some of the harsh truths that you kind of learned along the way? Things that you're now aware of as you go forward?
Amazon is not your friend. Amazon is trying to make money from you, the way any traditional publisher would. They've set up a scheme that if you aren't successful, it doesn't really hurt them. So that's a reality. And I started with book 1 all in Amazon, Kindle Unlimited, KDP Direct, all my publishing, all my hardbacks and paperbacks were through them. My audiobooks through Audible. But then in September, I took the first book out of Kindle Unlimited and went wide, because one thing I really want is I'd like to have my book in libraries. And I priced it in
Same.
such a way, because when I read an audiobook, I read a lot of audiobooks through the library. And if I really like an audiobook, if I really like a book, I'll buy the hardback and it goes on my shelf. And I want people to have access to my stuff that can't afford to spend 30-40 bucks a week on ebooks, or whatever. I know somebody who's said they have 3,000 audiobooks, and that's a lot. That's a lot of coin. So that was important to me. And also in going wide, you can go to Books A Million and request my book and they can ship it to your house. That's fantastic. Barnes & Noble, you can walk into Barnes & Noble today and say, I want The Blood of a Dragon. Here, I'll pay for it, and it'll come to your house. So that's cool.
Nice.
No bookstores stock anything anymore. If you're not Stephen King, they just can't. They have such a limited space, and they have to sell so much other non-book stuff to keep the doors open.
Oh, sure.
They can't.
You got to figure, like, there was millions of authors when I was a kid going to Barnes and Noble. Like, then the sheer number of authors out there right now, compiled over the years, like, of course there's no space. Like, they can't house everybody. It's so funny that you opened with Amazon is not your friend, because we had Mike DeFrench on, who I also met through TikTok, and as far as royalties are concerned, he's like Amazon all the way. Amazon is the one that gives you like 80% or whatever. Like that's the one to go by. But so it's interesting how like what matters to the author is gonna totally change that entire experience with Amazon. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I guess my expectations were probably wrong going in. I thought that Amazon was going to do more to promote my book, that I would have ways, but no, it's a platform.
Yeah.
And I have to push it
It's
if
up
it's
to
going to
you,
do
man.
anything. And I didn't like the limitations. So I'm kicking around putting the first book back in KU at some point. But right now, I'm really digging that that people are like, hey, I live in Hoboken, New Jersey. Can I get this in my library? Well, yes, you can. And it's about a third what a traditionally published book is going to cost your library, ebook wise. So I like that. And
Nice.
I like seeing, oh, look, I made 80 cents because some library I'll never be in bought my book, or, whatever. I get those little reports, and it's like, to me, it represents somebody else having access to read my book, and really at no cost to them. So
Absolutely.
that's
Beautiful. What's the best writing advice you've gotten in your many years of writing? Something that stuck with you.
something that stuck with. Dr. Hurlow told me that I needed to write what I know, because I wrote a lot of stuff that I enjoyed reading, but it wasn't. I didn't connect with it. But when I wrote other things, she said, "This is really good," and it was confusing to me for a while. I didn't really get it at the time, because I would say, I'm the same writer that wrote this and this. I wrote both of these things, but in going back and looking, I'm like, no, there's a difference. My connection, like my heart, is obvious in this and not so much in this. So write what you know in terms of the character, because I mean, I love fantasy. I want to write fantasy. Does that mean I can't write fantasy because I've never lived in Narnia? No, but I need to write characters that I can relate to, and that really clicked for me.
So write what you know is actually more like write what you relate to, right? What you
Yeah.
care about, right? About the things that you actually hold dear.
Yeah, and I've met some science fiction authors who say, "Oh no, I don't the science stuff. I will write and I'll say brackets, write some science thing here, and I'll come back later and make it up, or I'll consult an expert and try and make it real." And I'm like, "Okay, well, good."
Yeah, in my experience, the stories, whether it's TV shows, movies, novels, whatever, the genre stories that I connect to the most are going to be the ones that are character driven, the ones that are, emotional, full of like raw emotion. It doesn't matter what the science fiction part of it is, what the fantasy part of it is, as long as the characters are there and real to the reader.
Yeah,
Sure,
I
it's all about
I
the
heard a
characters.
class say, "Well, fantasy and romance are basically the same genre," and I'm like, "That's a weird thing to say."
People say that about fantasy and sci-fi.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's weird. But if you boil it down, there's a veneer over these characters, where they are, when they are, the type of things they use. That all changes, and there obviously are tropes that are different between them, but they also share this reality that some sort of creature that you can relate to, be it a human or a Vulcan or whatever, you have to be able to relate to it, and it has to, their journey has to resonate with you in some way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, what's your most useful writing habit or technique? The thing that you always make sure that you do when you're writing a new book, or the thing that gets you out of a tight spot? What is that secret for you?
So I failed as a writer for 30 years, and I thought it was because I was lousy. But what I figured out is, at me, I have to have an outline that is very solid, because if I don't, I see something shiny and I go off the rails, and before you know it, I'm writing a different story and it doesn't make sense, and I'm like, what have I done? But if I have an outline that I keep coming back to, and I outlined pretty deeply, so that when I sit down, typically when I sit down to write, I'm writing a scene. So it's probably going to be between 800 and 1200 words, give or take. That's what I aim for. So that has helped me so much, and I resisted that because I was like, man, I don't want those shackles. I'm a free spirit, but I figured out, yeah, but you've got to have a lane to run in. If you don't have some constraints,
Yeah,
you're just gonna go crazy, and that was my problem. That fixing that made all the difference. So learning how to outline well, and then being willing to adjust the outline if I need to, because obviously I figure things out about the story as I go. Uh, but that's the most important thing for me to be able to finish something.
I outline, but I always find that I don't outline enough. And on the second one in the series, I plan on outlining uh, a lot more deeply, a lot more layered into
Mm.
it, so that there's a little bit less, guesswork going on when I'm writing the actual chapters. I
Right.
like the idea of the whole like architect versus gardener being more
Hmm.
the gardener. I've always kind of subscribed to that because I like the discovery of the writing process. But as far as like making my deadlines and getting these books out in a timely manner, like I'm gonna need to outline a little more seriously.
Yeah, and that's what I found is I could have total freedom within this scene to do what I want to do. I can't burn the place down, and the characters they still do things. They still do things that I didn't expect, um, but I've got to adjust. And usually, it's doing things that are detrimental to the design of the party that I've got to go. Okay, how are we gonna react to that? So yeah.
Absolutely, Mr. Adkins. We are getting close to the top of the hour here. We're going to switch gears into the live chat Q&A for a minute or two here before we wrap up. But first, I would like to remind everyone at home that this Tuesday, there's something going on. All right, everybody. Thank you. That's this Tuesday, the day after tomorrow. We are going to be doing Tuber Book Club, 4 p.m. Eastern. We're going to cover the first half of the McMurdo Rift by Bradley Lejeune, and I can't wait to get into it. I read a version of this book, or at least I read the prologue of a version of this book, and I was clashing really really hard with the opening line, and it was my one note to him. I was like, I had to start this thing like 3 times, bro, because this opening line was just like punching me in the face every time I couldn't get through it. And I'm very happy to see that he changed the opening line for the final version. And I'm like, oh, it's so much cleaner. I just breeze right through it. Look, I'm a whole chapter deep already. Fantastic. So I can't wait to talk about it this Tuesday, 4 p.m. Make sure that you guys are there. Let's do the thing for live chat. All right. Now, admittedly, my Wi Fi has been a little funky today, and I fear that I lost some of the live chat for a little while there. So I only have one question so far, but I feel like we're probably going to harp on it for a little while. Do you always start out with a new novel for Nano, or do you also use it to complete drafts that you have already begun? How do you utilize your NaNoWriMo?
The last 3 years, I've used it to complete projects that I already have. Um, I use October to kind of outline and lay out, so I have some things to write, and then I try and just hit November as hard as I can and write as much as I can, which is tricky. We have 2 family vacations every year in November that we work around, so that makes it tricky. But
That is tricky.
yeah, but knowing that and planning, I'm able to get it done. So
Very nice. And so, And so you definitely use the whole like Preptober thing to your advantage then.
Yeah, and a lot of times the last 2 years I've been in the middle of writing, so it just kind of rolls right in. It's just I kind of up my word count. I try and aim for about 800 words a day normally. So, you really got to kick it in to that
Oh, sure.
1667 for NaNoWriMo.
Yeah, I tend to average around 1,000 words
Yeah.
in a nice like 1 to 2 hour writing session. So we'll see if I can get those rookie numbers up, punched up a little bit. I want to use NaNoWriMo this year for plotting my next book, but I'm still editing the first one, and I wanted to finish that first before I started the next
Mhm.
one. So I may not make it into November, but whenever I am done editing it, I think I'm just going to do the NaNoWriMo thing, because
Yeah.
even if it's in December or whatever it is, I'll just dive into it and try to outline the entire second book as my NaNoWriMo project, because it's probably going to be about. I mean, my first book is at 166K
Mhm.
word count wise. I know my second one is going to be bigger, so yeah, a nice 50K outline might be nice.
Yeah.
Next question we have up from Aphrodite Lee. I am always fascinated by the writer process, especially the timeline from first draft to final. How long does it usually take you to get your work done?
Well, done that's a four-letter word because
It is.
one of the things that I did incidentally with the first book is I did the audio book, and that came after the book was already out, and that was an afterthought. This time I tried to plan it to come out to release at the same time. Impossible. But it took right at a year because I spent about 4 months writing and about 3 months editing, and then trying to get everything to line up, which I have decided forget that. It doesn't have to. My audiobook is never going to line up with my releases, as long as I stick with my current narrator because they're incredibly busy. So it really does take a full year because the editing process is so tedious. And um, for me, because I use beta readers and I use alpha readers and those kind of things. My wife does a lot of my editing because she's capable, um, but I'm on her time schedule. So it's a very
Sure.
tedious process.
And I'm sorry, what was the word count you said on average there?
About 100,000. So
About 100K
98
for a
and a half
year.
for the first one. Yeah, and
Not
about
bad.
110 for the second one. Yeah.
It's not bad at all. Yeah, yeah. 166 for my first. I'm anticipating at the very least 200K for the second, if
Hmm.
not more. I'm gonna try to get
Yeah.
it down as much as possible, but the growing cast list and expanding the world and all that, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It was the problem with the first book. It started out with what I thought was a short story, and then I realized,
Mhm.
oh, this is the prologue to a novel. And then I'm writing the novel, and now like halfway through it, I'm like, this is more like a trilogy. And like it just keeps growing. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
So Aphrodite says that for her, it ranges from 4 months to 6 months, with 5 months being the average in there for 60 to 80K. So that's pretty quick. That's not bad.
Yeah.
It's not a
That's
bad turnaround.
I would like to get closer to that. I'd like to have two releases a year, one in this main series and then one in something else. So
See, I know myself enough to know that I'll never be the guy who can get a book out every year, let alone the guys who get 3 books out in a year.
oh yeah, I
I'm
don't.
focused on making, yeah, I don't know. So I'm focused on making the one that I release every 2 to 3 years as big an event as possible. As
Yeah.
big, as epic as like, and as worth your money as possible.
Yes, setting for a year really helped me market ahead of time and put a lot
Nice.
of effort into that. So
How many betas do you use, and how many passes do you take? So by passes, I take it she means drafts and all that.
yeah, so I'm usually at about, this is going to sound bad, 5 drafts. The first draft is
Not
mine.
too bad.
I go through that. The second draft goes to what I would call alphas. I call mine like cute names like Dragon Eyes because it's dragon themed and all that. And then they go back, and then my wife goes through it. And then it goes back out to a couple people who are,
So she's third in line.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Yes. She, like I said, if she had not become a dentist, she probably would have become an English professor. So she has qualifications, but the things like the developmental editing, she doesn't read fantasy. So for her, the
You got to have
developmental
all that
part,
done before she gets to it.
right, right, and she's learning those things. But when she goes through, then I have people that are punctuation people and all that kind of stuff, and then she makes a final pass. Yeah, my proofreaders. That's the fourth pass, and then the fifth pass is just me and every pair of eyes I can get on it to say, okay, you've capitalized Elvin here, but you didn't over here. The continuity stuff,
Sure,
which
sure.
that's just nightmares. Just like, hey, how come you spell this character's name differently here? And I'm just like, oh,
It's a typo.
it's a typo.
Just fix it and move on. Yeah.
Exactly. Mentally fix it and keep reading.
Yeah. See, with me, I have a very similar setup where the first draft was for me. The second draft goes to my sister, who's my editor. Much like your wife, very accomplished in writing, knows what she's doing, knows what she's and to the point where like I can trust her with a good developmental edit and everything. So she's my first like big edit. And then the third draft that I build off of her goes to my critique partners, which are other authors that I know their stuff. I like the way they write. I respect the way that they craft a story, and I let them kind of critique my stuff there. And then goes to the beta readers, so I can get the reader feedback, and then finally one last like proofreader before the thing is going to go out. At least that's the plan anyway.
And to answer the question specifically, I have 6 or 7 beta readers that I kind of change them in and out because some people are like, well, this is, here you go, but this really isn't my deal. I just want to read the book. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. But I kind of pick people with specific skills. And you got to move them around. The first time I did betas, one of my guys went through and did all kinds of typo stuff. I'm like, bro, I just want you to read it and tell me what you think. And so
yeah, she says she drives her editor crazy with continuity. That, and she tends to switch tenses a lot. I've gotten better about that. That was a huge problem for me. I would switch tenses for no reason, mostly because when I'm drafting or not drafting but outlining, like brainstorming, I tend to just use like present tense. But when I'm actually writing the novel, I tend to do past tense, and so in switching the things over, I miss them sometimes. Our final question for the live chat Q&A: your publishing goal is one novel a year? Question mark.
Yes, and I had planned to do a 9-month release this time, but as I was getting closer to it, I thought, if I do, it's not going to be a very good product. So I slowed down and I was content to say a year. As long as I'm working full time, that's going to be my reality. So that's fine. Hey, one a year is fine until I get to a situation where this is all I do. I'm content.
Very nice. Very nice. I have to explain to my readers exactly what I am looking for and make it clear. No typos. Read for the story. Yeah, you're not proofreaders. You're beta readers.
Yes.
Mr. Atkins, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so very much for joining us today. Now, for those of you at home watching this on the replay, etc., if you enjoyed hearing from Mr. Atkins today and you want more from Mr. Atkins, we're going to have his episode of Typewriters Podcast up on Thursday. That's what he and I are going to go do now after this. So please be sure to be there. Thursday on my channel, 4 p.m. It'll be a premiere, so there will also be a live chat during that thing, and we'll go ahead and dive into that. Mr. Atkins, I know you got a full-time job, you got a family. I don't expect you to be there, but if you can, please stop on by and say hi to everybody. They might have more questions for you. Who knows? But goodbye for now, because we are going to see you again on Thursday. Everybody, don't forget Tuber Book Club on Tuesday. That is also at 4 p.m. That's always the magic number around here, 4 p.m. As for next Sunday, we have Don Dougal, who is the author of The Birds and the Beekeeper, which, as I understand it, is spicy romance, as the kids say these days. Spicy. Thank you for everybody in the chat who stuck around. Aphrodite Lee, you came in just in time to catch us wrapping up. So thank you thank you so much for being here. Bye to everyone. Mr. Adkins, stick around. We're going to do the next show after this. And for everybody at home, right on writers, we out.